David Morrison thought his 40th birthday would be a quiet family celebration with cake and his two children. But when 29-year-old Ashley Chun rang his doorbell holding a balloon and gift, calling him birthday boy in front of his wife Rachel, the kitchen knife would soon be covered in blood instead of birthday cake. If you're drawn to true crime stories that reveal how quickly perfect families can shatter, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We uncover the shocking cases where birthday celebrations turn into crime scenes and family secrets explode in the most devastating ways. But let's go back to where it all began. The Morrison household at 247 Cedar Lane in South Oak Cliff, Dallas, had always been the picture of suburban success. David Morrison, a 40-year-old entrepreneur who owned a growing chain of convenience stores throughout the Dallas area, had built his reputation on hard work and business acumen. His stores, Morrison's Quick Stop, had expanded from a single location to 7 thriving businesses over the past decade, making him a recognizable figure in the local business community. Rachel Morrison, his 34-year-old wife, taught 3rd grade at Hillcrest Elementary School, where her warm personality and dedication to her students had earned her the respect of parents and colleagues alike. She was the kind of teacher who stayed late to help struggling students and spent her own money on classroom supplies, believing that every child deserved the best education possible. Her co-workers often commented on how lucky David was to have married someone so caring and devoted. Together, David and Rachel had created what seemed like an ideal family life. Their 2 children, 10-year-old Michael and 7-year-old Sophie, were bright, well-behaved kids who excelled in school and participated in neighborhood activities. The family attended St. Matthew's Methodist Church every Sunday, where David served on the finance committee and Rachel organized the children's Christmas pageant each year. To their community, they represented everything that American family values stood for. The Morrison home itself reflected their success and stability. The 2-story colonial house featured a manicured front lawn that David maintained religiously every weekend, a white picket fence that Rachel had insisted on when they first moved in, and seasonal decorations that changed with mathematical precision every few months. Inside, the walls were covered with family photographs documenting years of happiness. Vacation trips to national parks, birthday parties in their backyard, school events where Michael played soccer and Sophie performed in dance recitals. But beneath this carefully maintained surface, cracks had been forming for over a year. David's business success had come with a price that extended far beyond the long hours and weekend work he claimed were necessary for expansion. His behavior had begun changing in subtle ways that Rachel initially attributed to the stress of running multiple businesses in an increasingly competitive market. The first signs appeared in late 2022, when David began taking frequent private phone calls that he would end abruptly whenever Rachel entered the room. He started working later hours, often not returning home until after the children had gone to bed, claiming that supplier meetings and inventory management required his personal attention at each location. When Rachel suggested hiring additional managers to reduce his workload, David would dismiss her concerns, insisting that successful businesses required hands-on leadership and that delegation was a luxury he couldn't afford yet. Financial irregularities soon followed the behavioral changes. Rachel, who had always managed the household budget while David focused on business finances, began noticing unexplained cash withdrawals from their joint checking account. When she asked David about these transactions, he would explain them as business expenses that would be reimbursed or emergency repairs at one of the stores that required immediate cash payments. The explanations were always plausible enough to satisfy Rachel's concerns, but the pattern continued with increasing frequency. David's employees at the convenience stores noticed changes as well, though they were reluctant to discuss their observations with anyone outside the business. Several longtime workers mentioned that David had become distracted during store visits, frequently checking his phone and taking calls outside in the parking lot. His previously methodical approach to inventory and staffing had become erratic, with David sometimes leaving stores understaffed while he attended to what he described as banking meetings or supplier negotiations that seemed to occur at unusual hours. The source of David's distraction was Ashley Chun, a 29-year-old loan officer at First National Credit Union whom he had met in early 2022 while negotiating financing for his 6-store location. Ashley was everything that Rachel was not: single, ambitious, and unencumbered by the responsibilities of family life. She had graduated from SMU with a business degree and had quickly established herself as one of the credit union's top performers, specializing in small business loans and commercial financing. What began as professional interactions during David's loan application process had gradually evolved into something more personal. Ashley was impressed by David's business success and his plans for continued expansion, while David was attracted to Ashley's youth, energy, and genuine interest in his professional achievements. Unlike Rachel, who had become focused primarily on their children's activities and her teaching responsibilities, Ashley could discuss market trends, expansion strategies, and financial projections with the kind of enthusiasm that David had been missing in his personal life. Their first meeting outside of business hours occurred in March 2022, when David suggested they continue their discussion about loan terms over dinner at an upscale restaurant in downtown Dallas. Ashley agreed, telling herself that networking with successful clients was an important part of her professional development. The dinner lasted 3 hours, during which they discovered shared interests in hiking, foreign films, and travel to exotic destinations that David had always wanted to explore but had never been able to pursue due to family obligations. The relationship escalated gradually over the following months, with David finding increasingly creative excuses to visit the credit union for what he claimed were follow-up discussions about additional financing options. Ashley, who had initially maintained professional boundaries, found herself looking forward to David's visits and making herself available for meetings that extended well beyond normal business hours. By summer 2022, they were meeting regularly for lunch, dinner, and weekend activities that David explained to Rachel as networking events essential to his business growth. By September 2022, David Morrison's carefully constructed double life had evolved into a full-scale deception that required constant vigilance and increasingly elaborate lies. What had begun as innocent business lunches with Ashley Chun had transformed into a passionate affair that consumed David's thoughts and dominated his decision-making in ways that would have horrified his wife Rachel if she had known the true extent of his betrayal. Ashley had proven to be everything David felt was missing from his 15-year marriage. Where Rachel had become focused on parent-teacher conferences, soccer practice schedules, and household routines, Ashley offered intellectual stimulation and adventure. She was genuinely interested in David's business expansion plans, offering financial insights from her credit union experience and suggesting investment strategies that Rachel would never have understood or cared about. More importantly, Ashley made David feel young again, reminding him of the ambitious man he had been before marriage and children had anchored him to a predictable suburban existence. The affair required sophisticated planning that tested David's ability to manage multiple deceptions simultaneously. He purchased a second cell phone that he kept hidden in his car, registered under the name of his business to avoid detection. Ashley was programmed into this phone under the contact name Austin Supplies, a fictional vendor that provided plausible cover for frequent calls and text messages. David established new routines that provided opportunities for secret meetings, early morning inventory checks that were actually breakfast dates, extended supplier negotiations that covered evening dinners, and weekend site visits that allowed for overnight trips to hotels outside Dallas. The financial cost of maintaining his double life began straining even David's successful business cash flow. Ashley expected to be treated like the sophisticated woman she believed herself to be, which meant expensive restaurants, designer gifts, and weekend getaways to luxury resorts. David found himself withdrawing increasing amounts of cash from business accounts to fund these activities, carefully timing transactions to avoid detection during Rachel's monthly review of their personal finances. By December 2022, David had transferred over $15,000 from Morrison's Quick Stop accounts to cover Ashley-related expenses. He disguised these transactions as legitimate business costs, consulting fees, equipment maintenance, supplier advances, and marketing expenses. The money funded Ashley's birthday trip to San Antonio, Christmas jewelry that she wore to their private celebrations, and monthly apartment payments that David had begun contributing to under the guise of helping a friend through temporary financial difficulties. Rachel's suspicions began crystallizing during the holiday season, when David's behavior became so erratic that even their children noticed something was wrong. He would return home from work, smelling of expensive perfume that Rachel didn't recognize, claiming he had been hugging female employees who were celebrating promotions or personal milestones. His phone habits became suspicious, with David frequently stepping outside to take calls that he claimed were from suppliers on the West Coast who worked different hours. More troubling was David's emotional distance from family traditions that had previously been important to him. The annual Christmas light tour that the family had enjoyed for years was postponed repeatedly due to David's emergency work obligations. The New Year's Eve celebration they had planned with neighbors was canceled when David claimed he needed to travel to Austin for an urgent business meeting. These disruptions to established family patterns created tension that even 10-year-old Michael commented on, asking Rachel why Daddy seemed angry all the time. Ashley, meanwhile, was becoming increasingly frustrated with the limitations of their relationship. While she enjoyed the financial benefits and excitement of dating a successful married man, she had begun expecting more commitment and public acknowledgement of their connection. During their January 2023 weekend in Houston, she raised the subject of David's future plans directly. "How long are we going to keep sneaking around?" Ashley asked as they sat in their hotel room, overlooking the downtown skyline. "I'm 29 years old, David. I want a real relationship, not just stolen moments between your family obligations." When David tried to deflect with promises that things would change eventually, Ashley became more specific about her expectations. "I've been patient for almost a year," she continued, "but I need to know that this is going somewhere. Are you planning to leave Rachel? Or am I just wasting my time with a man who's never going to prioritize me?" David's response that he needed more time to figure things out only increased Ashley's determination to force the issue. Throughout the winter and spring of 2023, Ashley began testing the boundaries of their secret relationship in ways that made David increasingly uncomfortable. She started calling his business phone during family dinner hours, knowing that Rachel might overhear his conversations. She would drive past Morrison's quick-stop locations during times when she knew David was there with Rachel and the children, making her presence known through casual waves and smiles that seemed innocent but felt threatening to David. The most alarming incident occurred in March 2023, when Ashley appeared at Michael's soccer game, claiming she was there to support a friend's child who played for the opposing team. She positioned herself directly across from David and Rachel in the bleachers, wearing a dress that David recognized as one he had purchased for her during their San Antonio trip. Throughout the game, Ashley made eye contact with David while engaging in animated conversation with other parents, creating a level of risk that terrified him. "Who was that woman?" Rachel asked on the drive home from the soccer game. "She kept looking at you during the game, and I swear I've seen her somewhere before." David's explanation that she was probably a customer from one of his stores satisfied Rachel temporarily, but the incident marked a turning point in his relationship with Ashley. By summer 2023, David had transferred over $27,000 from his business accounts to cover Ashley-related expenses, a sum that was becoming increasingly difficult to hide from his accountant and business partners. The financial strain was affecting store operations, with David unable to invest in necessary equipment upgrades and employee benefits that his competitors were offering. Several longtime employees had approached him about salary increases that he couldn't afford, leading to turnover that threatened the quality of service at his locations. Ashley's demands for more time, more money, and greater commitment reached a crescendo in the weeks leading up to David's 40th birthday in April 2024. She had grown tired of being a secret and had begun making veiled threats about revealing their relationship unless David made concrete steps toward leaving his marriage. "I'm not going to be your dirty little secret forever," Ashley told him during what would be their final private dinner together. "Either you start treating me like the woman you love, or I'll find someone who will." The ultimatum terrified David, who realized that Ashley had the power to destroy everything he had worked to build. What David didn't know was that Ashley had already decided to take matters into her own hands, and his 40th birthday would provide the perfect opportunity to force a confrontation that would end one way or another. April 8th, 2024, began like any other Tuesday in the Morrison household, with no indication that it would become the day that destroyed their family forever. Rachel had taken the afternoon off from Hillcrest Elementary to prepare for David's 40th birthday celebration, a modest gathering she had planned with their 2 children and a few close neighbors. She spent hours in the kitchen preparing David's favorite meal, grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, and the chocolate cake recipe that had become a family tradition for special occasions. David returned home from his stores earlier than usual, claiming he wanted to spend quality time with the family on his milestone birthday. But his behavior throughout the afternoon was noticeably tense and distracted, constantly checking his hidden phone and making excuses to step outside for what he claimed were work-related calls. Rachel attributed his nervousness to the stress of turning 40, not knowing that David was actually fielding increasingly aggressive text messages from Ashley Chun. "Happy birthday, birthday boy," Ashley had texted that morning. "Hope you're ready for your surprise tonight. This is going to be a celebration you'll never forget." When David responded that she needed to stay away from his house, Ashley's messages became more threatening. "You can't ignore me forever, David. It's time Rachel learned the truth about where her husband has been spending his time and money." The celebration began peacefully at 7:30 p.m., with Michael and Sophie presenting their father with handmade cards and small gifts they had purchased with their allowance money. Rachel had invited the Henderson family from next door and Mrs. Rodriguez from across the street, creating the kind of intimate neighborhood gathering that had always been important to their social circle. David tried to appear engaged and grateful, but those who knew him well noticed his frequent glances toward the front windows and his obvious distraction during conversations. By 8:15 p.m., David was beginning to relax, believing that Ashley's threats had been empty intimidation tactics designed to frighten him into greater compliance with her demands. The cake had been served, photographs had been taken, and the conversation had turned to David's plans for expanding his business into neighboring counties. For a brief moment, David allowed himself to believe that his secret life and his family life could continue to coexist without collision. At exactly 8:20 p.m., the doorbell rang with a cheerful persistence that immediately caught everyone's attention. Rachel, who wasn't expecting any additional guests, wiped her hands on her apron and walked toward the front door with the kind of welcoming smile she reserved for unexpected visitors. David's blood went cold as he realized that Ashley had followed through on her threats. When Rachel opened the door, she found an attractive young woman holding a bright blue balloon shaped like the number 40 and a beautifully wrapped gift bag. Ashley was dressed in a form-fitting red dress that was far too elegant for a casual neighborhood birthday party, her blonde hair styled in loose waves and her makeup applied with professional precision. She smiled brightly at Rachel with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing exactly what effect your presence will have. "Hi there," Ashley said with theatrical enthusiasm. "You must be Rachel. I'm Ashley Chun from First National Credit Union. I work with David on his business financing, and I just couldn't let his 40th birthday pass without stopping by to congratulate him personally." She held up the balloon and gift bag as if they were perfectly normal offerings for a business associate to bring to a family celebration. Rachel's initial confusion quickly shifted to suspicion as she took in Ashley's appearance and the obvious expense of her outfit and gifts. Something about the young woman's demeanor felt wrong, too familiar and comfortable for someone who claimed to be merely a professional acquaintance. "That's very thoughtful of you," Rachel replied carefully, "but we're having a small family celebration. Perhaps you could call David at work tomorrow." "Oh, I'm sure David won't mind," Ashley said, pushing past Rachel into the hallway without invitation. "After all the time we've spent together working on his expansion plans, I feel like part of the family already." The way she emphasized "time we've spent together" made Rachel's suspicions crystallize into something approaching certainty. David appeared in the hallway behind Rachel, his face pale with terror as he saw his worst nightmare materializing in his own home. "Ashley," he said quietly, his voice carrying a warning that she chose to ignore completely. "This isn't appropriate. You should leave." "Nonsense," Ashley replied with a laugh that sounded forced and slightly manic. "It's your 40th birthday, David. This is a milestone worth celebrating properly." She moved closer to him, standing far too close for professional colleagues, and held out the gift bag. "I picked out something special for you. Something that shows how much our relationship means to me." The other guests had gathered in the hallway now, sensing the tension and confusion that was rapidly filling the air. The Henderson children stared at the beautiful stranger with curiosity, while Mrs. Rodriguez watched with the sharp attention of someone who recognized drama when she saw it. Michael and Sophie stood behind their mother, uncertain why their father's birthday party had suddenly become uncomfortable. Rachel's teacher instincts kicked in as she realized that whatever was happening needed to be resolved quickly and away from the children. "Kids, why don't you go finish your cake in the kitchen?" she said firmly, though her eyes never left Ashley's face. The adults need to have a conversation. As the children reluctantly retreated, Ashley's mask of friendly professionalism began to slip, revealing something harder and more dangerous underneath. "Oh, Rachel," she said with false sympathy, "I think it's time you learned the truth about your husband's business activities. David and I have been much more than professional associates for quite some time now." The words hit Rachel like a physical blow, confirming every suspicion she had harbored for months, while simultaneously revealing the full scope of David's betrayal. The silence that followed Ashley's revelation was deafening, broken only by the sound of children's laughter drifting from the kitchen where Michael and Sophie were finishing their birthday cake, blissfully unaware that their family was disintegrating in the hallway. Rachel stared at the young woman who had just shattered her world with a single sentence, her mind struggling to process the confirmation of her worst fears. "What did you say?" Rachel asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. But even as she spoke, she already knew the answer. The expensive dress, the intimate familiarity with which Ashley had entered their home, the way David's face had gone white with terror. Everything suddenly made perfect sense. Ashley smiled with the cruel satisfaction of someone who had been waiting months to deliver this moment of truth. "I said David and I have been lovers for over a year," she repeated, her voice gaining strength from Rachel's obvious devastation. "All those late business meetings, weekend supplier conferences, emergency inventory checks, he was with me. We've been planning a future together while you've been playing house with his children." David finally found his voice, stepping between the two women with his hands raised as if he could somehow contain the explosion that was already occurring. "Ashley, stop. This isn't how this should happen." "Rachel, let me explain, Dash." "Explain what?" Rachel's voice cracked as 15 years of marriage collapsed around her. "Explain how you've been lying to me every day for a year. Explain how you've been stealing money from our children's future to buy gifts for your girlfriend. Explain how you let me plan this birthday party while your mistress was planning to humiliate me in my own home." The neighbors who had been invited to celebrate David's milestone birthday stood frozen in the hallway, uncertain whether to leave or stay, caught in the uncomfortable position of witnessing a family's private catastrophe. Mrs. Rodriguez quietly ushered her grandchildren toward the front door, whispering that they needed to go home, while the Hendersons exchanged glances that conveyed both shock and the awkward realization that they would be discussing this scene for months to come. Ashley seemed to feed off the chaos she had created, her eyes bright with a manic energy that suggested this confrontation was exactly what she had hoped for. "He's been unhappy for years, Rachel," she continued with false sympathy. "David told me how boring your marriage had become, how you never understood his ambitions or supported his dreams. I gave him excitement, passion, intellectual stimulation, everything you couldn't provide." The cruelty of the words, delivered in Rachel's own home during what should have been a celebration, triggered something primal in Rachel's psychology. This wasn't just adultery. This was a deliberate, calculated attack on everything she had built, everything she believed in, everything she had sacrificed to create a stable home for her children. "Get out," Rachel said, her voice gaining strength as shock gave way to rage. "Get out of my house right now." But Ashley made no move toward the door, instead stepping closer to David with a proprietary gesture that made her claim on him unmistakable. "Actually, I think it's time we stop pretending," Ashley replied. "David, tell her about the apartment lease you've been helping me pay. Tell her about the vacation we took to San Antonio last month when you said you were at a business conference. Tell her about the $27,000 you've transferred to my accounts over the past year." Each revelation was like a physical blow, and Rachel found herself backing toward the kitchen, needing distance from the woman who was systematically destroying her understanding of her own life. The specific details, the money, the trips, the ongoing deception, made it clear that this wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment, but a sustained betrayal that had lasted over a year. David followed Rachel into the kitchen, desperate to contain the damage, but Ashley pursued them both, seemingly determined to ensure that every secret was exposed, every lie revealed. "Rachel, please," David began, but his wife was no longer listening to him. She was staring at Ashley with an expression that combined heartbreak, rage, and something darker that David had never seen before. "You came to my children's home," Rachel said slowly, her voice taking on a tone that made David's blood run cold. "You came to my family birthday party wearing a dress my husband bought you with money stolen from our household. You stood in my hallway and bragged about destroying my marriage." Rachel's hand moved toward the wooden knife block on the counter, a wedding gift from her mother that had served the family faithfully for 15 years. Ashley, still high on her moment of triumph, seemed oblivious to the danger she had created by pushing a betrayed wife beyond her breaking point. "David deserves someone who appreciates what he's accomplished," Ashley continued, apparently unable to stop herself from inflicting more cruelty. "Someone young enough to give him the excitement he's been missing. Someone who won't let him settle for a boring suburban life." That was the moment Rachel's hand closed around the handle of the largest knife in the block. The kitchen knife felt heavy in Rachel Morrison's hand as she turned to face the woman who had systematically destroyed her marriage while standing in her own home. Ashley Chun, still riding the high of her dramatic revelation, seemed oblivious to the fundamental shift that had occurred in Rachel's psychology. The devoted elementary school teacher, the patient wife, the nurturing mother had been replaced by something far more dangerous. "You think this is funny?" Rachel asked, her voice eerily calm as she stepped away from the counter. "You think destroying a 15-year marriage and traumatizing 2 innocent children is some kind of game?" The knife blade caught the kitchen light, causing Ashley to finally notice the weapon in Rachel's hand. David immediately recognized the mortal danger that his reckless affair had created. "Rachel, put the knife down," he said, moving toward his wife with his hands extended in a gesture of surrender. "Please, let's talk about this rationally. The children are in the next room." But rational conversation was no longer possible. Ashley's calculated cruelty, delivered in front of neighbors and in the home where Rachel had devoted herself to creating stability and love for her family, had pushed her beyond the point where words could resolve anything. The months of suspicious behavior, missing money, and David's emotional distance suddenly made perfect sense, and the humiliation of having her marriage's destruction broadcast to their social circle was unbearable. "Rationally," Rachel repeated, her grip tightening on the knife handle. "You want to talk rationally about how you've been stealing from our children's college funds to pay for hotel rooms with your girlfriend? You want to discuss rationally how she showed up at our son's birthday party wearing a dress you bought with our grocery money?" Ashley, finally sensing genuine danger, began backing toward the hallway. "Rachel, you need to calm down," she said, her earlier confidence evaporating as she realized the confrontation had escalated beyond her control. "This isn't my fault. David pursued me. He told me his marriage was over." The lie was the final trigger. Rachel knew David's faults, but she also knew he would never have claimed their marriage was over while she was planning birthday parties and maintaining the family routines he had taken for granted. Ashley had been the aggressor, the predator who had targeted a middle-aged man's vulnerabilities and exploited them for financial gain. "Get away from my family," Rachel screamed, lunging toward Ashley with the knife raised. David stepped between them, trying to protect the woman who had destroyed his marriage, and the blade that Rachel had intended for Ashley plunged into his chest instead. The silence that followed was absolute. David looked down at the handle protruding from his shirt, his expression more surprised than pained, as if he couldn't quite comprehend that his 40th birthday celebration had ended with his wife stabbing him. He took 2 steps backward and collapsed onto the kitchen floor, blood pooling beneath him on the same tiles where his children had eaten breakfast that morning. Ashley screamed and ran from the house, her high heels clicking against the hardwood floor as she fled toward her car. Through the front windows, neighbors could see her fumbling with her cell phone, calling 911 while trying to start her engine with shaking hands. Mrs. Rodriguez, who had been lingering on the front porch, would later testify that Ashley was screaming, "She killed him. She killed David," into her phone. Rachel stood motionless in the kitchen, staring at her husband's body and still holding the bloody knife. The sound of Ashley's screaming had brought Michael and Sophie running from their bedrooms, and their horrified cries upon seeing their father on the floor would haunt everyone who heard them. Mrs. Henderson, who had remained in the house during the confrontation, quickly ushered the children outside and away from the scene. Dallas police arrived at 8:47 p.m., just 27 minutes after Ashley Chun had rung the Morrison doorbell with birthday gifts and congratulations. They found David Morrison dead on his kitchen floor, Rachel Morrison standing beside him in a state of shock, and a crime scene that told the story of a family birthday party that had ended in murder. Rachel was arrested without resistance. During her interrogation, she admitted to stabbing David, but maintained that she had been aiming for Ashley, who had invaded her home and bragged about destroying her marriage. Prosecutors argued that regardless of her intended target, Rachel had committed murder in the presence of her children and neighbors, showing a level of rage that went beyond temporary insanity. The trial lasted 3 weeks, with Ashley Chin testifying about the affair and the financial transfers that had funded their relationship. Bank records revealed that David had stolen over $27,000 from his business accounts to pay for Ashley's apartment, vacations, and gifts. Defense attorneys argued that Rachel had been provoked beyond endurance by Ashley's cruel revelations and public humiliation. The jury deliberated for 8 hours before returning a verdict of guilty on charges of second-degree murder. On June 15, 2025, Judge Patricia Williams sentenced Rachel Morrison to 25 years in state prison, noting that while the circumstances were tragic, nothing justified taking a life in front of children. Michael and Sophie Morrison were placed in the custody of Rachel's sister in Houston, far from the Dallas neighborhood where their family had disintegrated. Ashley Chun moved to California shortly after the trial, unable to bear the scrutiny and blame she faced in Dallas. The Morrison house on Cedar Lane was sold to pay legal fees and victim compensation. Its for sale sign a reminder of how quickly perfect families can be destroyed by hidden betrayals. Today, the case serves as a chilling reminder that affairs destroy more than marriages. They can destroy entire families, leaving children orphaned and communities shattered by violence that could have been prevented with honesty and communication.